There's nothing more terrifying than fearing for your unborn child's life. Amanda Kellner knew that fear all too well as she lay beneath her bed, her pregnant belly pressed against the cold, hardwood floor. Her shaking hands held the phone as she whispered to the 911 operator, "I'm hiding under the bed. Please hurry." Her husband, Marcus, had been acting strange for weeks. His anger was getting worse, and now she was scared for her life and her baby's life. When Officer James Briggs arrived at their house, he found Amanda exactly where she said she would be, hiding under the bed, shaking with fear. The police thought they would find signs of domestic violence. Instead, they found something much worse. Hidden throughout the house were weapons, secret documents, and proof that Marcus was involved with dangerous criminals. Amanda had no idea her husband was living a double life. How could someone hide such dark secrets from the woman carrying his child? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 6 months earlier, Amanda Kellner had been planning the nursery with the gentle excitement of a woman who had waited 32 years to become a mother. She stood in the spare bedroom of their modest colonial home on Maple Street, one hand resting on her barely showing belly, the other holding paint swatches in soft yellows and greens. Marcus had insisted they wait to learn the baby's gender, wanting to be surprised, and Amanda had agreed. Everything about their life together had been built on compromise and mutual respect. "What do you think about sunshine morning?" she had asked Marcus, holding up a pale yellow sample. He was installing the ceiling fan, his insurance adjuster's steady hands making quick work of the electrical connections. "Perfect," he had said, climbing down from the ladder to kiss her forehead. "Just like you." That was the Marcus she remembered. Thoughtful, gentle, the man who brought her coffee in bed every Sunday morning and rubbed her feet after her long days teaching kindergarten at Roosevelt Elementary. The man who had proposed on a quiet beach in Maine, telling her she was the steady harbor he'd been searching for his entire life. The memory felt like looking at someone else's life now. Amanda's sister Beth had been the first to notice the changes. During their weekly dinner at Romano's Italian restaurant, Beth had set down her fork and studied Marcus across the table. "You seem distant lately," Beth had said in her direct way. "Everything okay at work?" Marcus had smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. "Insurance is a stressful business. People's lives hang in the balance when claims get processed. Sometimes I carry that weight home." It sounded reasonable. Marcus had always been conscientious about his work, staying late to ensure families received fair settlements after accidents or disasters. Amanda had admired his dedication to helping people during their most vulnerable moments. But the late nights had become later. The phone calls had become more frequent and hushed. Marcus would step outside to take them, even in winter, returning with explanations about difficult clients or complex cases that required discretion. "Privacy laws," he would say when Amanda asked. "You understand." She did understand. As a teacher, she dealt with confidential information about children and families daily. Discretion was part of caring for others professionally. The first real warning sign had come from their neighbor, Mrs. Carver, an elderly widow who lived next door and kept careful watch over their quiet suburban street. Mrs. Carver had cornered Amanda while she was getting the mail one afternoon in her second trimester. "Dear, I don't mean to pry," Mrs. Carver had said, her weathered hands clutching her cardigan, "but has Marcus taken up a new hobby? I've seen him coming and going at all hours, sometimes with people I don't recognize." Amanda had felt a flutter of unease, but pushed it down. "He's been working some difficult cases. Sometimes he has to meet with investigators or contractors at odd hours." Mrs. Carver had nodded, but her expression remained troubled. "Of course, dear. I just worry about you, especially with the baby coming. If you ever need anything..." "Thank you, Mrs. Carver. That means more than you know." The conversation had planted a seed of doubt that Amanda tried desperately to ignore. Marcus worked hard to provide for their growing family, Wasn't it unfair to question his dedication simply because his schedule had become unpredictable? But other things began to change too. Marcus, who had always been meticulous about their finances, became secretive about money. He switched their bank statements to electronic only and changed the passwords without telling her. When Amanda asked about their savings for the baby's expenses, Marcus became defensive. "I'm handling everything," he had said, his voice carrying an edge she'd never heard before. "You don't need to worry about the finances. Focus on staying healthy." The dismissal had stung. Amanda had always been an equal partner in their marriage, and suddenly she felt like a child being told to leave adult matters to the grown-ups. Her work at Roosevelt Elementary had become a refuge. In her classroom, surrounded by 5-year-olds learning to read and write their names, Amanda felt competent and valued. The children adored her, and parents regularly requested conferences to discuss how much their little ones loved Mrs. Kellner. "You're glowing," her colleague Jennifer had said during lunch duty one day. "Pregnancy suits you." Amanda had smiled, but the glow felt dimmed by her growing concerns at home. She found herself staying later at school, grading papers that could wait until tomorrow, reluctant to return to the tension that had settled over her marriage like a heavy blanket. The breaking point had come 3 weeks before that terrible night under the bed. Marcus had returned home at nearly midnight, his clothes disheveled and his hands dirty. When Amanda asked where he'd been, he'd snapped at her with a ferocity that made her step backward. "I'm working my ass off to support this family," he had said, his voice low and dangerous. "The least you could do is trust me instead of interrogating me like I'm some kind of criminal." The word criminal had hung in the air between them like a prophecy. That night, Amanda had lain awake listening to Marcus shower for what seemed like an hour. When he finally came to bed, he smelled like industrial soap, the kind used to wash away stubborn stains. She'd wanted to ask about it, but sensed that any question would trigger another outburst. Instead, she had curled on her side, one hand protectively covering her growing belly, and wondered when her husband had become a stranger. The Marcus who now came home at all hours wasn't the man who had once spent Saturday mornings reading pregnancy books aloud, making silly voices for the baby. He wasn't the man who had cried when they heard their child's heartbeat for the first time. This new Marcus was someone else entirely. Someone who made Amanda feel unsafe in her own home. Her wedding ring, a simple platinum band that Marcus had saved for months to buy, felt heavy on her finger now. Sometimes she caught herself twisting it nervously, as if the circular motion could somehow restore the security it had once represented. The night she found herself hiding under the bed, Amanda had finally admitted what she'd been avoiding for weeks. She no longer knew the man she had married. The father of her unborn child had become someone capable of violence, someone with secrets dark enough to shatter everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and the life they had built together. As Officer Briggs had helped her out from under that bed, his kind eyes full of concern and professional compassion, Amanda realized her old life was over. Whatever came next, she would face it as a mother protecting her child, even if it meant discovering truths that would change everything forever. The basement had always been Marcus's domain. Amanda rarely ventured down the narrow wooden stairs into the dimly lit space that housed their water heater, furnace, and Marcus's workbench. He had claimed the area as his workshop soon after they moved in, installing pegboards for tools and metal shelving for supplies. Amanda had been grateful to have one less space to organize and clean. But at 2 a.m. on that October night, the sound of shredding paper had pulled her from restless sleep. Amanda's pregnancy had made sleeping through the night impossible. The baby pressed against her bladder constantly, and her growing belly made finding a comfortable position increasingly difficult. When she heard the mechanical whir of what sounded like a paper shredder coming from downstairs, she had initially assumed Marcus was working late on insurance files. Then she remembered they didn't own a paper shredder. Wrapping her robe around her expanding waist, Amanda had crept downstairs, guided by the thin strip of light seeping from beneath the basement door. The mechanical grinding continued, punctuated by Marcus's voice speaking in urgent, hushed tones to someone on the phone. "No, it has to be tonight," she heard him say. "They're getting too close. I need everything gone before morning." Amanda pressed her ear to the door, her heart beginning to race. Who was getting too close? Close to what? "The wife doesn't know anything," Marcus continued. "She's not a problem, but if they search the house..." The words hit Amanda like a physical blow. The wife. He was talking about her as if she were an obstacle, a complication to be managed, rather than the woman carrying his child. Her hand trembled as she slowly turned the basement door handle. The hinges creaked softly, but the shredding noise masked the sound. From the top of the stairs, Amanda could see Marcus hunched over a portable document shredder, feeding papers into its hungry mouth. File boxes sat open around him, their contents scattered across his workbench. Even from her limited vantage point, Amanda could see these weren't insurance documents. The papers were photographs, surveillance photos of people and places she didn't recognize. There were maps with routes marked in red ink, lists of names with dollar amounts written beside them, and what looked like identification documents bearing Marcus's photograph, but different names. "Marcus!" she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. He spun around so violently that he knocked over the file box beside him, sending more papers cascading to the concrete floor. For a moment, his face showed raw panic before shifting into something harder, more dangerous than she had ever seen. "Amanda!" His voice was carefully controlled. "What are you doing up?" "I heard noise. I thought..." She began descending the stairs, but Marcus moved quickly to block her path. "Go back to bed." It wasn't a request. "What are all these papers? Why are you destroying..." "I said go back to bed." His hand gripped her upper arm, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to stop her movement. "This doesn't concern you." Amanda looked past him at the chaos on his workbench. Among the scattered documents, she glimpsed what looked like blueprints of a building and photographs of men in expensive suits, shaking hands in what appeared to be parking garages. "Marcus, what is this? What's really going on?" His grip tightened. "You need to trust me. Some things are better left alone." "Trust you?" The word came out sharper than Amanda intended. "You've been lying to me for months. Coming home at all hours, taking secret phone calls, hiding money." "I'm protecting you," Marcus interrupted, his voice rising. "Both of you. Do you understand that? Everything I do is to keep you and the baby safe." Safe from what? The question hung between them like a challenge. Marcus's jaw worked silently, as if he were calculating how much truth he could afford to reveal. Finally, he released her arm and stepped back. "There are people in this world who would hurt you to get to me," he said. "The less you know, the safer you are." "Get to you?" "Marcus, you're an insurance adjuster." "What could..." "I'm not just an insurance adjuster." The admission came out flat, emotionless. "I haven't been for a long time." Amanda felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "What does that mean?" "It means you need to go upstairs and pretend this conversation never happened. Can you do that?" The man standing before her bore Marcus's face, but everything else about him, his posture, his voice, the cold calculation in his eyes, belonged to a stranger. Amanda realized she was truly afraid of her husband for the first time in their marriage. "I'm your wife," she said, placing a protective hand over her belly. "I'm carrying your child. Don't I deserve to know who you really are?" Something flickered in Marcus's expression. Pain, perhaps, or regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "No," he said simply. "You don't." Amanda turned and walked back up the stairs, her legs shaking with each step. Behind her, the paper shredder resumed its grinding, destroying whatever evidence of Marcus's secret life remained. She closed the basement door and stood in their kitchen, surrounded by the domestic artifacts of their shared life. Her prenatal vitamins on the counter, their wedding photo on the refrigerator, the grocery list written in her careful handwriting. Everything looked the same, but nothing would ever be the same again. Over the following weeks, Marcus's behavior became increasingly erratic. He would disappear for days at a time, offering vague explanations about complex insurance cases requiring travel. When he was home, he moved through their house like a man checking for threats, testing locks and peering through windows. Amanda began sleeping with her phone beside her pillow. The night everything unraveled completely, Marcus had come home covered in what looked like dirt and something darker. His clothes went directly into a garbage bag that he loaded into his truck and drove away to dispose of somewhere Amanda couldn't imagine. When he returned an hour later, she was waiting in the kitchen. "Where were you tonight?" she asked. "Work. Your supervisor called earlier. He said you've been on administrative leave for 2 weeks. Marcus went very still. "What supervisor?" "Jim Harrison. He said he's been trying to reach you about returning your company equipment. You shouldn't have answered that call." The menace in his voice sent ice through Amanda's veins. "Marcus, you're scaring me." "Good," he said, moving closer. "You should be scared. Do you have any idea what you've done?" That was when Amanda realized her husband wasn't just hiding something criminal, he was capable of violence. The gentle man who had once traced letters on her pregnant belly, spelling out words of love for their unborn child, was gone. In his place stood someone who looked at her like she was an enemy. As Marcus reached for her, Amanda ran for the stairs, her only thought to get to their bedroom and lock the door. But Marcus was faster, his hand catching her wrist at the bottom of the staircase. "We need to talk," he said, and something in his tone made Amanda certain that if she went anywhere alone with him, she might not survive the conversation. That was when she broke free and ran for their bedroom, diving under the bed with her phone clutched in her trembling hands, whispering those words that would change everything. "I'm hiding under the bed, please hurry." Detective Frank Sullivan had been working domestic violence cases for 12 years, but something about Amanda Kellner's situation struck him as different from the moment Officer Briggs called it in. The evidence found in the house suggested this wasn't a simple case of spousal abuse escalating. This was something far more complex and dangerous. "Mrs. Kellner," Detective Sullivan said, settling into the chair across from Amanda in the small interview room at the police station. His voice carried the gentle authority of a man who understood trauma. At 58, with silver-threaded hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, he had the presence of someone who had seen everything but retained his humanity. "I want you to know that you're safe now. We're going to do everything in our power to keep it that way." Amanda nodded, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. The safe house where they'd taken her was comfortable, but sterile, a place designed to provide security rather than comfort. She had been there for 6 hours, and everything still felt surreal. "Can you tell me how long you've been married to Marcus?" Detective Sullivan asked, pulling out a small notebook. 3 years next month." Amanda's voice was hoarse from crying. "We dated for 2 years. Before that, I thought I knew him. What did you know about his work?" "He told me he was an insurance adjuster for Midwest Mutual. He said he specialized in large claims, fires, accidents, that sort of thing. It explained why he traveled sometimes and why he had to work odd hours." Detective Sullivan made a note. "Did he ever bring work home? Files? Paperwork? Phone calls?" Amanda shook her head. "He said everything was confidential. Insurance privacy laws. I respected that boundary. The weapons we found in your house, did you know they were there?" "Weapons?" Amanda's voice rose with shock. "What weapons?" 3 handguns hidden in various locations throughout your home, a shotgun in the basement, ammunition stored in your garage rafters. Detective Sullivan watched her face carefully. "You had no knowledge of any of this?" Amanda felt sick. "None. Marcus always said he didn't believe in guns. He said they made homes more dangerous, especially with children." The irony of that statement hung heavy in the air. Detective Sullivan continued his questioning gently but thoroughly, building a picture of a woman who had been completely deceived by the man she'd married. A soft knock interrupted them. Officer Jennifer Walsh entered with a file folder thick with documents. "Detective, we've got preliminary results from the house search," she said, handing him the folder. "And Mrs. Kellner's sister is here." "Beth," Amanda said, relief flooding her voice. "Can I see her?" "Of course, Officer Walsh. We'll bring her in." When Beth entered the room, Amanda stood and fell into her sister's arms, finally allowing herself to break down completely. Beth, 2 years older and fiercely protective, held her tightly while shooting questioning looks at Detective Sullivan. "What exactly is going on?" Beth demanded. "Amanda called me crying, saying Marcus was dangerous and the police were involved." "None of this makes sense." Detective Sullivan waited for Amanda to compose herself before continuing. "Your brother-in-law appears to have been living a double life. We're still piecing together the details, but the evidence suggests involvement in organized crime." "Organized crime?" Beth's voice was incredulous. "Marcus, the man who won't even jaywalk?" "That's what made him so effective," Detective Sullivan said. "The perfect cover. Suburban husband, stable job, no criminal record. Meanwhile, we believe he was laundering money through fraudulent insurance claims and possibly facilitating other criminal activities." Amanda sank back into her chair. "I don't understand. How could I live with someone for 5 years and never know any of this?" "Because he's very good at compartmentalizing," a new voice said from the doorway. A woman in her 40s entered, dressed in a crisp FBI jacket. "Special Agent Lisa Park, Financial Crimes Division. Mrs. Kellner, your husband is suspected of laundering approximately $2 million over the past 3 years. The number hit Amanda like a physical blow. $2 million? Fraudulent. Insurance payouts to shell companies, fake claims for non-existent damages, premium skimming. He turned his legitimate job into a sophisticated money laundering operation. "But our bank account," Amanda protested weakly. "We live modestly, we drive 10-year-old cars, we shop at discount stores." "Classic behavior for this type of criminal," Agent Park explained. "Living below their means maintains the cover. The money was being funneled elsewhere." Detective Sullivan opened the folder Officer Walsh had brought him. "We've also found evidence suggesting Marcus was involved in facilitating human trafficking. Fake insurance documents that provided cover for transport companies moving people illegally across state lines." Amanda felt the room spin. The man who had rubbed her feet when they were swollen, who had assembled the crib in their nursery with patient care, was involved in human trafficking. "I think I'm going to be sick," she whispered. Beth quickly helped her to the small bathroom attached to the interview room. When they returned, Amanda looked pale but determined. "What happens now?" she asked. "First, we need to make sure you're safe," Detective Sullivan said. "Marcus fled before we could arrest him, and we have reason to believe he's not working alone. There may be other people who view you as a liability." "A liability? But I don't know anything." "You know Marcus," Agent Park said. "You lived with him, observed his patterns, might have overheard conversations without realizing their significance. To his associates, that makes you dangerous." The safe house they moved Amanda to that evening was a modest apartment on the other side of the city. Detective Sullivan personally drove her there, with Beth following in her own car. As they pulled into the parking garage, Amanda noticed the security cameras and the way Detective Sullivan checked their surroundings before allowing her to get out of the car. "There's a panic button by your bed and another in the kitchen," he explained as they entered the apartment. "Press either one and we'll have officers here within minutes. Don't open the door for anyone except Beth or myself, and only after we identify ourselves with the code word." "What's the code word?" Amanda asked. "Harbor," Detective Sullivan said. "You mentioned Marcus told you that you were his harbor. I thought it was appropriate." Amanda nodded, touched by his thoughtfulness, even as the irony of the word choice cut deep. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the obstetrician who had been caring for Amanda throughout her pregnancy, arrived an hour later to check on both mother and baby. Her presence brought a measure of normalcy to the surreal situation. Your blood pressure is elevated, which is understandable given the circumstances, Dr. Hayes said after completing her examination. But the baby's heartbeat is strong. How are you feeling physically? Tired, scared, like I'm living in someone else's nightmare. Dr. Hayes sat beside Amanda on the safe house's generic couch. Trauma affects pregnancy in complex ways. We'll need to monitor you closely to ensure the stress doesn't impact your health or the baby's development. Will my baby be okay? Amanda asked, the question she'd been afraid to voice. Children are remarkably resilient, even in utero, Dr. Hayes assured her. But your emotional well-being directly impacts your physical health. We're going to make sure you have all the support you need. As night fell over the safe house, Amanda lay in the unfamiliar bed, one hand resting on her belly. The baby was active tonight, as if responding to her elevated stress levels. She whispered to her unborn child, promising to protect them both, no matter what other revelations about Marcus lay ahead. Detective Sullivan's business card sat on the nightstand, along with the panic button that represented her only connection to safety. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more revelations, more evidence of how thoroughly the man she loved had deceived her. But tonight, for the first time in months, Amanda felt truly safe. The knowledge came with a bitter realization. It had taken discovering her husband was a criminal for her to finally feel secure again. The evidence room at the police station looked like the inventory of a spy thriller. Amanda stared through the glass window at tables covered with items that had once been hidden throughout her home. Items she had lived inches away from without ever knowing they existed. 7 different identities, Agent Park said, holding up the collection of fake passports found in Marcus's hidden wall safe. Michael Torres, David Chen, Robert Hayes, James Mitchell, Anthony Kowalski, Stephen Clark, and Marcus Kellner. We're running all the names through federal databases, but it appears Marcus Kellner might not even be his real identity. Amanda felt her legs weaken. Beth steadied her with a firm hand on her elbow. You mean I don't even know my husband's real name? Amanda asked. We're working to determine that, Detective Sullivan said gently. The fingerprints from your house are running through AFIS now. We should know more soon. The fake passports represented only a fraction of what the police had discovered. Hidden behind a false wall in their basement, investigators had found a sophisticated document forgery operation, high-end printers, blank forms for various types of identification, and templates for official government seals. Mrs. Kellner, Agent Park continued, we need to ask you about your financial accounts. Have you noticed any unusual activity? Large deposits or withdrawals? Amanda shook her head. Marcus handled most of our finances. He said it was easier that way, since he understood insurance and investments better than I did. Did you ever see bank statements? He switched everything to electronic statements about a year ago, said it was better for the environment. Detective Sullivan and Agent Park exchanged a look that Amanda was learning to recognize. The look that meant they had discovered something she wasn't going to like. Mrs. Kellner, Detective Sullivan said carefully, your joint checking account has been systematically drained over the past 8 months. There's currently less than $300 remaining. The words didn't immediately register. That's impossible. Marcus said we had nearly $50,000 saved for the baby and the house down payment. I'm afraid that money has been transferred to offshore accounts we're still trying to trace, Agent Park said. It appears your husband has been stealing your joint savings to fund his criminal activities. Amanda sank into a chair, one hand instinctively moving to protect her belly. Not only had Marcus endangered her life, but he had also stolen their child's future, the money they had saved for cribs and college funds, and all the expenses that came with raising a family. There's more, Detective Sullivan said, his voice heavy with regret. We contacted Midwest Mutual Insurance, where Marcus claimed to work. Amanda looked up, already knowing she wouldn't like what came next. Marcus Kellner was never employed by Midwest Mutual. The business cards, the work shirts, even the insurance adjuster license. All forgeries. But he went to work every day, Amanda protested weakly. He had meetings, deadlines, performance reviews. We believe he was actually coordinating criminal activities, Agent Park said, using the insurance adjuster cover to access properties, meet with contacts, and launder money through false claims. A soft knock interrupted them. Officer Walsh entered with a grim expression. Detective, we've got a problem. 3 of Marcus Kellner's known associates were arrested in a drug bust in Detroit this morning. During questioning, they mentioned concerns about the wife becoming a liability. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. What kind of concerns? Detective Sullivan asked. They're worried she knows more than she's saying. There's talk of eliminating the problem before she can testify. Amanda felt the blood drain from her face. They want to kill me. We're not going to let that happen, Detective Sullivan said firmly. But we need to increase security measures immediately. The safe house suddenly felt less safe. Amanda was moved that afternoon to a different location, a suburban apartment complex with better sightlines and multiple exit routes. Detective Sullivan personally supervised the relocation, his paternal instincts fully engaged. Mrs. Kellner, he said as they settled into the new safe house, I want you to know that protecting you and your baby is my highest priority. I have a daughter about your age, and if she were in this situation, I'd want someone looking out for her the way I'm looking out for you. His kindness nearly brought Amanda to tears. In a world where everything familiar had been stripped away, Detective Sullivan's steady presence had become her anchor. Dr. Hayes arrived for Amanda's scheduled prenatal appointment, bringing portable equipment to monitor the baby's health. The examination took place in the safe house's master bedroom, with Beth holding Amanda's hand and Detective Sullivan standing guard in the hallway. Your blood pressure is still elevated, Dr. Hayes said after completing the ultrasound. But the baby is developing normally. You're at 28 weeks now, still early, but if you were to deliver prematurely, the baby would have excellent survival chances. I don't want my baby born into this nightmare, Amanda said, watching the tiny form moving on the ultrasound screen. Children are more resilient than we give them credit for, Dr. Hayes replied. This baby will be born knowing they are deeply loved and fiercely protected. That matters more than the circumstances. The ultrasound images showed a healthy, active baby. Amanda studied the profile shot, trying to see traces of Marcus in the tiny features. Would her child inherit his dark hair, his musical laugh, his capacity for deception? That evening, while Beth prepared dinner in the safe house kitchen, Amanda sat by the window watching the parking lot below. Detective Sullivan had positioned unmarked cars at strategic points around the complex, their occupants maintaining constant surveillance. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Amanda, it's Marcus. I know you're scared, but I need you to know that I never meant for you to get hurt. Stay away from the police. They don't understand the situation. I'll explain everything when I can. I love you and the baby. Amanda's hands shook as she showed the message to Detective Sullivan. He's reaching out, Detective Sullivan said, immediately calling for a trace on the number. This is actually good news. It means he's still in the area and making mistakes. Should I respond? Amanda asked. Not yet, but we might ask you to engage with him later, under controlled circumstances. The idea of communicating with Marcus again filled Amanda with a complex mixture of fear and longing. Despite everything she had learned about his criminal activities, part of her still missed the man she thought she had married, the man who had been gentle and loving and excited about becoming a father. Detective Sullivan, Amanda said quietly, do you think any of it was real? Our marriage, his love for me, his excitement about the baby? Detective Sullivan considered the question carefully. I think people are capable of genuine emotion even while living false lives. The Marcus who loved you might have been the most real part of who he was, even if everything else was a lie. As night fell over the safe house, Amanda felt the baby moving restlessly in her womb. She whispered to her unborn child, making promises about the life they would build together, a life based on truth and safety, even if it meant facing that future alone. Outside, Detective Sullivan's officers maintained their vigilant watch, protecting a woman and child caught in the crossfire of a criminal organization they had never known existed. The game of cat and mouse was just beginning, and Amanda was learning that sometimes the most dangerous predators were the ones who lived closest to home. The ultrasound image that changed everything was tucked into Amanda's purse like a talisman. At 32 weeks pregnant, she finally knew she was carrying a daughter, a little girl who would need her mother to be stronger than Amanda had ever imagined possible. "It's a girl," Dr. Hayes had said during the appointment, her voice warm with joy despite the circumstances. "Would you like to know if we can see her face clearly?" Amanda had nodded, unable to speak as she watched her daughter's profile appear. On the monitor, the baby had Marcus's nose, but Amanda's delicate chin. Seeing her child's features gave Amanda something she hadn't felt in weeks: hope for the future. "She's beautiful," Beth whispered, squeezing Amanda's hand. "Have you thought about names?" "Emma," Amanda said without hesitation. "Emma Grace. It means whole and blessing." Detective Sullivan, who had been standing guard outside during the appointment, smiled when Amanda shared the news. "Emma Grace. I like that. Strong name for a strong little girl." The knowledge that she was carrying a daughter transformed something fundamental in Amanda's approach to her situation. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about creating a world where her daughter could grow up safe and loved, free from the shadows of her father's crimes. "Detective Sullivan," Amanda said that evening as they reviewed security protocols, "in the safe house, I want to testify against Marcus's organization." Detective Sullivan looked up from his files, surprised. "Mrs. Kellner, you don't have to make that decision now. We can protect you and Emma without—" "No," Amanda interrupted, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "These people threaten my daughter. They're involved in human trafficking, money laundering, and who knows what else. If my testimony can help stop them, then that's what I need to do." Beth looked concerned. "Amanda, testifying means putting yourself in even more danger." "I'm already in danger," Amanda replied, one hand resting on her belly. "But Emma deserves a world where criminals like her father's associates can't hurt innocent people. If I don't stand up to them, who will?" Detective Sullivan studied Amanda's face, recognizing the transformation he had seen in other victims who chose to become survivors. "Testifying would be incredibly helpful to our case, but it would also mean entering the witness protection program, probably permanently." "What does that mean?" "Exactly. New identities for you and Emma. Relocation to another part of the country. No contact with anyone from your previous life except under very controlled circumstances." Amanda considered this. No more teaching at Roosevelt Elementary, no more Sunday dinners with Beth, no more of the life she had built before Marcus's. Lies destroyed everything. Would Emma be safe? As we can make her," Detective Sullivan assured her. "The program has protected thousands of families over the years." 3 days later, Amanda found herself in a federal courthouse for the first time in her life. The preliminary hearing for 3 of Marcus's associates, men with names like Vincent Torino, Anthony Ricci, and Carlos Mendez, was being held to determine if there was sufficient evidence to proceed with federal charges. Amanda sat in the gallery, her identity protected by a legal alias and a pair of sunglasses that made her feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Detective Sullivan sat beside her, a reassuring presence as she watched the men who had wanted her dead. They looked ordinary, disappointingly so. Vincent Torino could have been anyone's uncle, a stocky man in his 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. Anthony Ricci appeared younger, maybe mid-30s, with the clean-cut appearance of a suburban soccer dad. Carlos Mendez wore an expensive suit, and had the bearing of a successful businessman. These were the monsters who had threatened her unborn child. They looked like men she might encounter at the grocery store or parent-teacher conferences. "Don't let their appearance fool you," Agent Park whispered. "Torino has been linked to 6 unsolved homicides. Ricci runs a prostitution ring that traffics underage girls. Mendez coordinates drug distribution across 3 states. The prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Janet Morrison, presented evidence methodically and convincingly. Financial records, surveillance footage, recorded phone conversations, a paper trail that painted a picture of a sophisticated criminal organization with tentacles reaching into legitimate businesses across the Midwest. "Your Honor," Attorney Morrison said, "the defendant Marcus Kellner, though currently at large, was instrumental in laundering over $2 million through fraudulent insurance claims. His wife, who has agreed to cooperate with federal authorities, can provide crucial testimony about his methods and contacts." At the mention of her cooperation, Amanda noticed all 3 defendants turn to scan the gallery. Even behind sunglasses and using an alias, she felt exposed and vulnerable. After the hearing, Detective Sullivan escorted Amanda back to the safe house with an increased security detail. The message was clear. Her decision to testify had elevated the threat level significantly. That evening, Amanda attended her first meeting of a support group for victims of domestic deception. Dr. Patricia Hayes had recommended the group, which met weekly in the basement of a community center across town. "My name is Amanda," she said when it was her turn to speak, "and I've been married to a stranger for 5 years. The other women in the circle nodded with understanding that came from shared experience. There was Janet, whose husband had been running a Ponzi scheme while she thought he was a financial advisor. Maria, who discovered her husband was married to 2 other women in different states. Rebecca, whose spouse had been embezzling from the charity where he worked. "The hardest part," said Janet, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and intelligent eyes, "is learning to trust your own judgment again. When someone you love deceives you so completely, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about people." Amanda found herself nodding. "I keep wondering what signs I missed. Were there clues I should have seen?" "That's the wrong question," said Dr. Sarah Chen, the therapist who facilitated the group. "The right question is, how could you have known? People who live double lives are experts at deception. They're not just lying to you, they're lying to everyone, including themselves." The group met for 2 hours every Tuesday evening. Amanda found comfort in the shared stories of betrayal and recovery, in the presence of women who understood the unique trauma of discovering that love had been built on lies. "What I've learned," Maria said during Amanda's 3rd meeting, "is that their deception doesn't negate our love. We loved genuinely, even if they didn't. That love was real, even if they weren't." Amanda carried those words back to the safe house, where Emma was growing stronger every day. At 34 weeks, the baby was nearly ready to enter the world, a world that would be vastly different from the one Amanda had imagined during those early months of pregnancy. Detective Sullivan checked in each evening, bringing updates on the investigation and maintaining the steady presence that had become essential to Amanda's sense of security. "We're getting closer to finding Marcus," he told her one evening. "His associates are starting to cooperate. Fear of long federal sentences tends to loosen tongues." "Do you think he'll surrender when you find him?" Amanda asked. Detective Sullivan considered the question carefully. "I think Marcus is discovering that the criminal life he chose comes with consequences he didn't anticipate. Whether he's willing to face those consequences remains to be seen." That night, as Amanda felt Emma's strong kicks against her ribs, she made a promise to her unborn daughter. Whatever happened with Marcus, whatever dangers still lay ahead, Emma would grow up knowing her mother had chosen courage over fear, truth over comfortable lies. The little girl growing inside her would never have to wonder if she was loved or valued or protected. Amanda would make sure of that. even if it meant testifying against the man whose child she carried, even if it meant starting over completely in a new life built on the ruins of the old one. Emma Grace Kellner would be born free from her father's sins, and that freedom was worth any sacrifice Amanda might have to make. The shoebox Amanda found while packing her belongings from the house contained 23 love letters Marcus had written during their courtship. She had saved them all, treasuring the romantic words that had won her heart 5 years earlier. Now, reading them in the sterile safety of the safe house, she saw them through different eyes. "My dearest Amanda," the first letter began, "you are the harbor I never knew I was searching for. In your eyes I see the man I want to become, steady, honest, worthy of the love you offer so freely." The irony cut deep. Even then, Marcus had been telling her exactly what she wanted to hear, while living a lie that would eventually destroy them both. Beth found Amanda crying over the letters and gently took them away. "These aren't going to help you heal," she said. "He was manipulating you even then." "But what if some of it was real?" Amanda asked. "What if he really did love me, somewhere underneath all the lies?" "Does it matter?" Beth asked, not unkindly. "Even if he loved you, he still put you and Emma in danger. Love that comes with that kind of risk isn't really love at all." The forensic accountant's report arrived that afternoon, delivered by Agent Park with an expression of barely controlled anger. Marcus hadn't just stolen their savings, he had been systematically draining their accounts for over 2 years, including money Amanda had inherited from their grandmother. The total amount stolen exceeds $200,000, Agent Park said. Money that should have been securing your daughter's future was instead funding human trafficking operations and drug distribution networks. Amanda stared at the figures on the page, each transaction representing another betrayal. The money for Emma's college fund, gone. The inheritance that was supposed to help them buy a larger house, gone. Even the small account Amanda had been building to surprise Marcus with a special anniversary trip, gone. "Can any of it be recovered?" Amanda asked. "We're working with international banking authorities to trace the offshore accounts, but recovery is unlikely. Most of the money has probably been laundered through so many transactions that it's effectively untraceable." That afternoon brought Amanda's first direct testimony to the federal grand jury investigating Marcus's criminal organization. The courthouse felt like a fortress, with multiple security checkpoints and armed marshals escorting her through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. Assistant U.S. Attorney Morrison prepared Amanda carefully for the questioning. "Remember, you're not on trial here. You're helping us understand how Marcus operated his cover life. The grand jury needs to understand how sophisticated these criminals are at deception." The grand jury room was smaller than Amanda had expected, filled with ordinary citizens who had been called to serve. They looked at her with a mixture of sympathy and curiosity as she settled into the witness chair, her pregnancy now impossible to hide at 35 weeks. "Mrs. Kellner," Attorney Morrison began, "can you tell the grand jury how long you believed your husband worked for Midwest Mutual Insurance?" "The entire time I knew him," Amanda replied, her voice steady despite her nervousness. 5 years. He had business cards, uniforms, even what appeared to be performance reviews. He would come home and tell me about difficult claims he was handling. "Did he ever bring actual insurance paperwork home?" "No. He said everything was confidential due to privacy laws. I respected that boundary because I work with children and understand the importance of confidentiality." One of the grand jurors, an elderly woman with kind eyes, raised her hand. "Mrs. Kellner, looking back now, were there signs that something wasn't right?" Amanda considered the question carefully. There were things that seemed unusual, but Marcus always had explanations that sounded reasonable. The late-night phone calls were difficult clients in different time zones. The cash he sometimes brought home was bonuses for handling complex cases quickly. "I trusted him because I loved him." "When did you first suspect something was wrong?" Attorney Morrison asked. when I found him destroying documents in our basement at 2 in the morning. But even then, I thought maybe he was disposing of old files or something work-related. It wasn't until I saw the weapons and fake identification that I realized how completely he had deceived me. The testimony lasted 3 hours. Amanda answered every question honestly, painting a picture of a woman who had been thoroughly manipulated by a master of deception. When it was over, she felt drained, but also strangely liberated. Each word of truth helped chip away at the lies that had defined her marriage. Detective Sullivan escorted her back to the safe house, where disturbing news was waiting. Marcus's criminal associates had been making inquiries about Amanda's location, offering substantial rewards for information about where she was being hidden. "We're moving you again," Detective Sullivan said. "Tonight." The third safe house was a small apartment above a bakery in a working-class neighborhood across town. The smell of fresh bread that rose from the shop below provided an oddly comforting backdrop to Amanda's increasingly precarious situation. Dr. Hayes arrived for Amanda's weekly prenatal appointment, bringing concerning news. "Your blood pressure is dangerously elevated," she said after completing the examination. "I'm putting you on immediate bed rest. The stress is taking a serious toll on both you and the baby." "I can't be on bed rest," Amanda protested. "I have more testimony scheduled, and Detective Sullivan needs me to—" "Mrs. Kellner," Dr. Hayes interrupted gently but firmly, "you're at risk for preeclampsia. If we don't manage your stress levels immediately, you could deliver prematurely or face life-threatening complications." The doctor's words sobered everyone in the room. Detective Sullivan, who had been planning to ask Amanda to participate in a controlled phone call with Marcus, immediately shelved those plans. "Your health and the baby's health are the priority," he said. "We'll find other ways to build our case." That evening, as Amanda lay in the narrow bed above the bakery, she felt Emma's movements becoming more urgent and frequent. At nearly 36 weeks, her daughter was almost ready to enter the world, a world that remained dangerous and uncertain. Beth had moved into the safe house permanently now, sleeping on the small couch and managing the practical details of Amanda's life while she remained on bed rest. The sisters had grown closer during this crisis than they had been since childhood, bonded by shared adversity and mutual protection. "Do you ever wonder what our lives would have been like if Marcus had been who he claimed to be?" Amanda asked one evening as Beth helped her with dinner. "I try not to think about alternate realities," Beth replied, "but I do think about the future. About Emma growing up knowing her mother is brave enough to stand up to criminals. About you rebuilding your life on your own terms." The phone call that changed everything came at 2:30 in the morning. Detective Sullivan's voice was tense with urgency as he spoke to the night shift officer stationed outside their apartment. "We've arrested Marcus Kellner," he said. "He was attempting to cross into Canada with a false passport. He's being held without bail pending federal charges." Amanda felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness. The man she had loved was finally in custody, unable to hurt her or Emma any longer. But his arrest also meant the final death of whatever remained of their marriage. "Does this mean we're safe now?" Amanda asked when Detective Sullivan arrived an hour later to brief her personally. "Safer," he said carefully, "but Marcus's organization is still operational. Some of his associates are still at large, and they may view your testimony as an ongoing threat." The next morning brought news that Marcus wanted to see her. He had requested a meeting through his attorney, claiming he had information that could help protect Amanda and their unborn child. "It could be a trap," Agent Park warned. "Marcus may be hoping to manipulate you into changing your testimony or refusing to cooperate further. Or he may genuinely want to help," Detective Sullivan added. "People facing life in federal prison sometimes experience genuine remorse." Amanda looked down at her belly, where Emma was resting quietly for once. The decision she made now would affect not just her own safety, but her daughter's future as well. "I'll see him," she said finally, "but only if you're confident it's safe." "We'll control every aspect of the meeting," Detective Sullivan assured her. "Maximum security, recorded conversation, limited time. You'll be protected." As Amanda prepared for what might be her final conversation with the father of her child, she realized that facing Marcus now felt less like confronting her enemy and more like saying goodbye to a ghost. The ghost of the man she had thought she married, the life she had thought they were building, and the future that had been stolen from them both. The woman sitting across from Amanda in the Federal Detention Center's visiting room bore little resemblance to the polished criminal wives Amanda had seen in movies. Julia Kellner, or Julia Santos, as she had been known for the past 15 years, looked like an elementary school teacher or a librarian. Her graying hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her hands shook slightly as she reached into her purse. "Mrs. Kellner," Julia said, her voice thick with an accent Amanda couldn't place, "thank you for agreeing to see me. I know this must be confusing." Detective Sullivan sat beside Amanda, his expression carefully neutral. The meeting had been arranged after Julia contacted the FBI, claiming to have crucial information about Marcus's criminal activities. But her first words suggested something even more complex. "Marcus is my brother," Julia continued, "but that's not the name we were born with. Our real names are Miguel and Julia Santos. We grew up in East LA. Amanda felt the world shift beneath her once again. Santos. But Marcus said his family was from Ohio. He said his parents died in a car accident when he was in college. Julia's eyes filled with tears. Our parents did die, but not in a car accident. And Miguel, Marcus, was only 12 years old when it happened. She pulled a worn diary from her purse, its cover faded and edges frayed from years of handling. "I've been carrying this for 23 years, waiting for the day when I might be able to help my brother remember who he used to be." Detective Sullivan leaned forward. "Ms. Santos, before you continue, I need to advise you that anything you say here may be used in criminal proceedings against your brother." "I understand," Julia said, "but Mrs. Kellner deserves to know the truth. And maybe if Miguel remembers who he was before the violence started, he can find his way back." Amanda's hands rested protectively over her belly, where Emma was unusually active, as if responding to the tension in the room. "Tell me about your parents." Julia opened the diary to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "Our father, Eduardo Santos, worked for a trucking company that transported goods across the Mexican border. What he didn't know was that some of those goods were drugs and money being moved by a cartel." "When did he find out?" Detective Sullivan asked. "When Miguel and I were in middle school. Papa discovered cocaine hidden in a legitimate shipment and reported it to the police. He thought he was doing the right thing." Amanda felt a chill of premonition. "What happened?" "The cartel found out who had reported them," Julia continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They came to our house on a Tuesday night. In March, Miguel and I were hiding in our bedroom closet when we heard the gunshots. The image hit Amanda like a physical blow. 2 children cowering in darkness while their parents were murdered downstairs. We stayed in that closet for 6 hours, Julia said, reading from her diary. Miguel kept his hand over my mouth so I wouldn't scream. We could hear the men searching the house, looking for anything Papa might have left behind as evidence." "What happened after that?" Amanda asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Social services separated us. Miguel went to one foster family, I went to another. Different cities, different schools. The state said it was for our protection, but it meant we lost each other on top of losing our parents." Detective Sullivan was taking notes, but Amanda could see the empathy in his expression. "How did Miguel, end up in criminal activities?" Julia turned several pages in her diary, landing on an entry dated 10 years later. "When Miguel turned 18, he aged out of foster care. He had no family, no support system, no way to process what had happened to us. He started looking for the men who killed our parents." "Looking for them how?" Amanda asked. "He joined the same cartel that had destroyed our family. He thought if he could work his way up, gain their trust, he could eventually get revenge. The revelation hit Amanda like cold water. Marcus hadn't become a criminal for money or power. He had been driven by a child's unresolved need for justice, twisted over decades into something unrecognizable. But instead of getting revenge, Julia continued, the life consumed him. The violence, the deception, the constant fear, it changed who he was. The gentle boy who used to read me bedtime stories became someone I didn't recognize. Amanda thought about the Marcus she had known, the man who had been tender and loving, who had cried when they heard Emma's heartbeat for the first time. Was any of it real? Our marriage? His love for me? Julia looked at Amanda with profound sadness. The love was real. Miguel may have forgotten many things about who he used to be, but he never forgot how to love. That's why I think your pregnancy terrified him. Terrified him. Why? Because becoming a father meant he might have to face the truth about what he had become. The idea of his own child growing up the way we did, surrounded by violence and lies, was his worst nightmare. Detective Sullivan set down his pen. Miss Santos, are you saying your brother was trying to leave the criminal organization? For the past year, yes. But leaving isn't something these people allow. Miguel knew that the only way to protect his family was to disappear completely. But he also knew that running would put Mrs. Kellner and the baby in even more danger. Amanda felt tears streaming down her face. So he was trapped. We both were, Julia said. I've been in witness protection for 15 years, ever since I testified against some of the same people Miguel was working with. I had to change my name, move across the country, give up any hope of reconnecting with my brother. Why are you telling us this now? Amanda asked. Julia reached across the table and gently touched Amanda's hand. Because Miguel is going to prison for a very long time, and your daughter deserves to know that her father isn't a monster. He's a broken man who made terrible choices trying to heal wounds that were inflicted when he was a child. Detective Sullivan cleared his throat. Miss Santos, this information could be helpful in Marcus's sentencing, but it doesn't change the fact that he committed serious federal crimes. I understand, Julia said, but maybe it can help Mrs. Kellner and her daughter understand that love and trauma can coexist in the same person. Miguel's crimes don't excuse what he did, but they might explain why he did it. As the meeting concluded, Julia handed Amanda a photograph from her diary. 2 children, perhaps 8 and 10 years old, smiling at the camera while building a sandcastle on a beach. That's Miguel and me during the last vacation we took as a family, Julia said. I want your daughter to know that her father was once an innocent child who loved deeply and dreamed of making the world a safer place. Amanda clutched the photograph, seeing Marcus's eyes in the face of the young boy who had no idea how much darkness lay ahead of him. Will you tell him I know the truth now? Amanda asked as they prepared to leave. If you want me to, Amanda considered this, feeling Emma's strong kicks against her ribs. Tell him that Emma will grow up knowing her father loved her, even if he couldn't show it in the right way. As Detective Sullivan drove Amanda back to the safe house, they rode in contemplative silence. The revelation about Marcus's past didn't excuse his crimes, but it added a layer of tragedy to an already heartbreaking situation. Does knowing the truth change anything for you? Detective Sullivan asked finally. Amanda looked down at the photograph of 2 children who had lost everything and been forced to find different ways to survive. It doesn't change what he did, she said, but it helps me understand that Emma and I aren't the only victims in this story. The FBI wire Amanda would wear during her final meeting with Marcus was smaller than she had expected, a device no larger than a button that would be sewn into the lining of her maternity sweater. At 37 weeks pregnant, she moved slowly. As the technicians fitted her with the recording equipment, every movement deliberate and careful. The range is excellent, Agent Park explained as she tested the device. We'll be able to hear every word from our position in the next room. If you feel unsafe at any point, just say the word harbor and we'll end the meeting immediately. Detective Sullivan had spent hours preparing Amanda for this encounter. Marcus had agreed to cooperate with federal authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. But prosecutors needed Amanda's help to verify his information and ensure he was telling the truth about his criminal organization. "Remember," Detective Sullivan said, "Marcus is facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. He has every incentive to minimize his role or implicate others falsely. Your job is to listen and let him talk. Don't prompt him or suggest answers." Dr. Hayes had cleared Amanda for the meeting despite her concerns about stress levels. "Your blood pressure is stable today," she said after completing Amanda's examination, "but I'll be standing by with medical support if needed. At this stage of pregnancy, we can't take any risks." The Federal Detention Center felt different this time. Amanda was escorted through additional security checkpoints, past guards who nodded respectfully as Detective Sullivan guided her through. Corridors that seemed designed to strip away any illusions about freedom or comfort. "Are you ready for this?" Detective Sullivan asked as they paused outside the interview room. Amanda nodded, though her heart was racing. "I need to do this. For Emma. She deserves to know the truth about her father, even if that truth is complicated." The interview room was sterile and small, with a metal table bolted to the floor and chairs that looked like they belonged in a hospital cafeteria. Amanda sat carefully, her hands resting on her belly where Emma was unusually quiet, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. When Marcus entered the room, Amanda barely recognized him. Prison had aged him dramatically in just 2 weeks. His face was gaunt, his hair had been cut short, and he wore the orange jumpsuit of a federal detainee. But his eyes, those were the same eyes that had looked at her with love on their wedding day. "Amanda," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. You look beautiful. How are you feeling?" "Tired," she replied honestly, "scared, confused." Marcus sat across from her, his shackled hands resting on the table. "I know you have questions. I know you deserve answers." "Start with your real name," Amanda said. "Miguel Eduardo Santos. I was born in East Los Angeles 34 years ago. Marcus Kellner was an identity I created when I was 22, after I decided I needed to leave my old life behind." "But you didn't leave it behind," Amanda observed. "You just got better at hiding it." Marcus nodded, shame evident in his expression. "I thought I could compartmentalize. I thought I could be Marcus the husband and Miguel the—" He struggled to find the right word. "Criminal," Amanda finished for him. "Yes, but I was wrong. You can't live 2 lives without both of them becoming corrupted." Amanda leaned forward slightly. "Why didn't you just leave? When you realized you loved me, when we got married, when I got pregnant, why didn't you just walk away from the criminal activities?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "Because walking away isn't an option in that world. Once you're in, the only way out is death or prison. I knew that if I tried to leave, they would hurt you to get to me. So instead, you put me in danger by staying. I thought I could protect you by keeping you ignorant. I thought if you didn't know anything, they would leave you alone." Amanda felt anger rising in her chest. "That wasn't your choice to make. Marcus, or Miguel, whoever you are, I'm both," he said quietly. "I'm the man who fell in love with you and dreamed of being a father, and I'm also the man who has blood on his hands. Both things are true. Tell me about the blood," Amanda said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. 3 years ago, a man named Roberto Vega started stealing from the organization's drug shipments. My job was to find him and recover the money. And did you? I found him. He had a family, a wife and 2 young daughters. When I saw those little girls, I couldn't—" Marcus stopped, his hands shaking. "I couldn't do what I was supposed to do." "What were you supposed to do?" "Kill him, kill all of them, to send a message." Amanda felt sick. The man sitting across from her, the father of her unborn child, had been sent to murder a family. "But you didn't," she said, praying she was right. No, I helped them disappear instead, gave them new identities, helped them relocate to Canada. Roberto's family is safe, but my failure to follow orders made me a liability to the organization. Is that why you were trying to flee to Canada when they arrested you? Marcus nodded. I was trying to find Roberto, to ask for his help in protecting you and Emma. I thought if we could all disappear together. Marcus, Amanda interrupted, the FBI told me you stole over $200,000 from our accounts. How does that fit with trying to protect us? Marcus's face crumpled. The money wasn't stolen for me. It was protection money. The organization demanded regular payments to ensure your safety. Every dollar I took from our accounts bought you another month of life. The revelation hit Amanda like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't been stealing from her. He had been paying to keep her alive. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Because I knew you would insist on going to the police, and that would have gotten you killed immediately. These people don't negotiate with law enforcement. Amanda sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything Marcus had told her. The wire recording device felt heavy against her chest, capturing every word that would be used to determine Marcus's fate, and the fate of his criminal associates. Marcus, she said finally, I need you to tell the FBI everything, every name, every operation, every crime. Not for them and not for you, but for Emma. I've already started, he said. Full cooperation. I know I'm going to prison for the rest of my life, but maybe my testimony can stop these people from hurting other families. What about Roberto's family? Are they still in danger? As long as the organization exists, everyone who crossed them is in danger. That's why I have to help destroy it completely. Amanda reached across the table and, despite everything, took Marcus's shackled hands in hers. Emma is going to ask about you someday. What should I tell her? Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Tell her that her father loved her more than life itself. Tell her that every mistake I made was because I didn't know how to be the man she deserved. And tell her, his voice broke, tell her that I hope she grows up to be as brave and strong as her mother. As the meeting concluded and Amanda was escorted back to Detective Sullivan, she felt a strange sense of closure. The man she had married was neither a hero nor a villain. He was a broken person who had made terrible choices while trying to protect the people he loved. The final phase of the federal case would begin tomorrow, with Marcus's full testimony against his former associates. Amanda's role in the proceedings was nearly complete, but the most challenging part still lay ahead. Rebuilding her life and preparing to raise a daughter whose father would be remembered as both a criminal and a man who had tried, in his flawed way, to choose love over violence. As Emma stirred in her womb, Amanda whispered a promise to her unborn daughter. Whatever legacy Marcus left behind, Emma would grow up knowing she was wanted, loved, and valued for who she was, not defined by the sins of her father. The courthouse was surrounded by federal marshals and media vans on the morning of Marcus's sentencing hearing. Amanda sat in the victim impact section, 38 weeks pregnant, and feeling like Emma might arrive at any moment. Dr. Hayes had wanted to induce labor the previous week, but Amanda had insisted on being present for this final chapter of Marcus's story. Detective Sullivan sat beside her, his presence a steadying force as Amanda prepared to deliver the victim impact statement. She had spent weeks writing. In her purse was an ultrasound photo of Emma and the childhood photograph Julia had given her of Marcus and his sister building sandcastles before their world collapsed. Mrs. Kellner, Judge Patricia Morrison called, "We're ready for your statement." Amanda rose slowly, feeling Emma's weight shift as she made her way to the podium. The courtroom fell silent as she adjusted the microphone and looked directly at Marcus, who sat at the defendant's table in a dark suit, his hands folded and his head bowed. "Your Honor," Amanda began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. 2 months ago, I thought I was married to an insurance adjuster named Marcus Kellner. I believed we were building a quiet suburban life together, preparing to welcome our first child into a safe and loving home. She paused, gathering strength. I now know that everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. Marcus Kellner doesn't exist. The man I loved was Miguel Santos, a broken child who grew up to make choices that destroyed multiple lives, including his own. Marcus looked up at her then, his eyes filled with anguish and regret. But I also learned something else. Amanda continued, I learned that love and trauma can coexist in the same person, that someone can commit terrible crimes while still being capable of genuine love. Miguel's criminal activities were inexcusable, but they grew from a child's unhealed wounds and a desperate desire for justice that became twisted over time. Judge Morrison leaned forward, clearly moved by Amanda's words. Your Honor, I'm not here to ask for leniency for Miguel Santos. His crimes are serious, and justice must be served. But I am here to ask that when you sentence him, you remember that redemption is possible, even in the darkest circumstances. Amanda reached into her purse and pulled out the ultrasound photo. In 6 weeks, I'm going to give birth to a daughter who will grow up without her father. Emma Grace Santos will carry her father's name, but she will not carry his shame. She will know that her father loved her enough to cooperate fully with federal authorities, even though it meant spending the rest of his life in prison. She looked directly at Marcus. I want Emma to know that her father was once an innocent child who lost everything, and that despite the darkness that followed, he was capable of love, sacrifice, and ultimately, truth. Marcus was crying now, tears streaming down his face as Amanda concluded her statement. Your Honor, Miguel Santos took away my sense of safety, my financial security, and my faith in my own judgment. But he also gave me the greatest gift of my life, our daughter. I pray that Emma will inherit her father's capacity for love without his capacity for deception. Amanda returned to her seat as Marcus's attorney, David Richardson, approached the bench for the defense's final argument. Your Honor, Richardson said, my client has provided unprecedented cooperation with federal authorities. His testimony has led to the arrest and conviction of 14 high-ranking members of a criminal organization responsible for drug trafficking, human trafficking, and money laundering across 6 states. Agent Park had briefed Amanda on the results of Marcus's cooperation. The information he provided had dismantled an operation that had been operating for over a decade, saving countless victims from exploitation and violence. Mr. Santos faces life in prison without the possibility of parole, Richardson continued, but his willingness to risk his own safety to expose this criminal network demonstrates genuine remorse and a desire to protect innocent people, including his own family. U.S. Attorney Morrison rose for the prosecution's final statement. Your Honor, while we acknowledge Mr. Santos's cooperation, we cannot ignore the severity of his crimes. Money laundering, conspiracy, accessory to multiple felonies. These are serious federal offenses that demand serious consequences. Judge Morrison reviewed her notes for several minutes before speaking. Mr. Santos, please rise. Marcus stood, his lawyer beside him, facing the judge who would determine the rest of his life. Mr. Santos, you have committed serious federal crimes that have caused immeasurable harm to innocent people, including your own wife and unborn child. However, your cooperation with federal authorities has prevented future crimes and brought justice to other victims. Amanda held her breath, one hand resting on her belly, where Emma was unusually still. Taking into account your cooperation, your lack of prior criminal record, and the testimony of your wife regarding your personal circumstances, I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The sentence was lighter than expected, but still meant Marcus would miss Emma's entire childhood. Amanda felt a complex mixture of relief and sadness as Marcus was led away in handcuffs, his eyes meeting hers one final time across the courtroom. As Amanda left the courthouse with Detective Sullivan and Beth, she felt the first sharp pain of labor beginning. Emma had waited for her father's story to reach its conclusion, and now she was ready to begin writing her own. The contractions started in the courthouse parking lot, coming in waves that made Amanda grip Detective Sullivan's arm with surprising strength. Dr. Hayes had warned them this might happen. The stress of the sentencing hearing combined with Amanda's advanced pregnancy had created the perfect storm for labor to begin. "We need to get to the hospital," Detective Sullivan said, helping Amanda into his unmarked police car, while Beth called Dr. Hayes from the passenger seat. "It's too early," Amanda gasped between contractions. "Emma isn't supposed to come for another 2 weeks. Babies have their own timeline." Dr. Hayes's voice came through Beth's phone speaker. 38 weeks is considered full term. Emma is ready to meet the world. The drive to Mercy General Hospital felt both endless and too short. Amanda found herself gripping the ultrasound photo of Emma, using it as a focal point during the increasingly intense contractions. In less than an hour, she would meet the daughter she had been protecting throughout this entire ordeal. Detective Sullivan stayed with Amanda and Beth until the medical team took over, his paternal concern evident, as he watched Amanda being wheeled into the delivery room. "I'll be right here when you're ready," he promised. "Emma's going to have the best honorary grandfather a little girl could ask for." The labor progressed quickly, too quickly for Amanda to process fully what was happening. One moment she was focused on breathing through contractions. The next, she was pushing with every ounce of strength she possessed, determined to bring her daughter safely into the world. "I can see her head," Dr. Hayes announced. "She has dark hair, just like her mama." Amanda thought of Marcus in that moment, wondering if he would ever see their daughter, if Emma would inherit his musical laugh or his tendency to hum while concentrating. The thought brought tears to her eyes, even as she pushed harder. "One more push, Amanda," Dr. Hayes encouraged. "Emma is almost here." With a final surge of effort that seemed to draw on every reserve of strength Amanda possessed, Emma Grace Santos entered the world at 4:47 p.m., weighing 6 pounds 2 ounces and announcing her arrival with a lusty cry that filled the delivery room with joy. "She's perfect," Dr. Hayes said, placing the baby on Amanda's chest. "Absolutely perfect." Amanda looked down at her daughter, tiny, red-faced and furious about being disturbed from her warm cocoon, and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. Emma had Marcus's dark hair and olive complexion, but her eyes, when they briefly opened, were Amanda's own shade of green. "Hello, sweet girl," Amanda whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I've been waiting so long to meet you." Beth stood beside the hospital bed, her own eyes wet with tears. "She's beautiful, Amanda. She looks like herself. Not like Marcus or like you, but like Emma." The observation was profound. This tiny person was her own individual, untainted by her father's crimes or her mother's trauma. Emma was a fresh start, a new beginning, a chance for love to exist without the shadows of deception. Dr. Hayes completed the medical checks while Amanda held Emma skin to skin, marveling at her daughters. Tiny fingers and perfect miniature features. Everything about Emma was healthy and strong, a testament to Amanda's determination to protect her child, despite the chaos that had surrounded the pregnancy. Detective Sullivan knocked softly on the door an hour later, carrying a small bouquet of pink roses and wearing the gentle smile of a man who had seen his fair share of new life entering troubled circumstances. "May I meet Miss Emma?" he asked, approaching the bed with the reverence reserved for newborns. Amanda carefully placed Emma in Detective Sullivan's experienced arms, watching as his professional demeanor melted into grandfatherly tenderness. "She's going to be just fine," he said softly, more to himself than to Amanda. "Look at those eyes. She's already studying the world, figuring out how it works." Emma seemed to settle in Detective Sullivan's arms, her crying subsiding as she focused on his voice. In that moment, Amanda realized that her daughter would never lack for father figures. Detective Sullivan, Dr. Hayes's husband, who had already offered to teach Emma to play baseball, Beth's boyfriend, who had volunteered to help. With college planning, Emma would grow up surrounded by people who chose to love her. Has Marcus been told about the birth? Amanda asked. Detective Sullivan nodded. His attorney called the prison. Marcus asked if he could write a letter to Emma for you to keep until she's old enough to read it. Amanda considered this. I think that would be appropriate. Emma should have something from her father, even if she can't have him. As evening settled over the hospital, Amanda sat in the quiet of her room with Emma nursing peacefully in her arms. Through the window, she could see the city lights beginning to twinkle. The same view Marcus would have seen from the courthouse windows as he was transported to federal prison. Your daddy loves you very much, Amanda whispered to Emma. He made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but his love for you was real. Someday, when you're old enough to understand, I'll tell you about the good man he tried to be underneath all the broken pieces. Emma's eyes drifted closed, her tiny hand wrapped round Amanda's finger with surprising strength. At less than 12 hours old, she was already demonstrating the resilience that would serve her well in life. Amanda knew that the road ahead would be challenging: single motherhood, rebuilding her career, possibly entering witness protection, if threats from Marcus's former associates materialized. But looking down at Emma's peaceful face, Amanda felt ready to face whatever came next. Her daughter would grow up knowing she was deeply loved and fiercely protected, and that knowledge would be Emma's foundation for building a life free from the shadows of her father's past. The letter from Marcus arrived 3 days later, delivered through his attorney and carefully screened by federal authorities. Amanda read it alone in her hospital room while Emma slept in the bassinet beside her bed. My dearest Emma, the letter began, by the time you read this, you will be old enough to understand that your father made choices that hurt many people, including your mother and you. I want you to know that every day I think about the man I could have been if I had chosen love over revenge, healing over violence. You are the best part of me, Emma Grace. In you lies all the potential I squandered, all the goodness I buried. Under years of anger and pain, your mother is the strongest, most courageous woman I have ever known, and she will teach you to be everything I failed to become. I give you my father's watch, the only thing I kept from before the darkness took. Hold, it belonged to your grandfather Eduardo, who was a good man trying to protect his family. I hope it will remind you that even in the Santos family line, there has been honor and love alongside the tragedy. Be better than me, my sweet daughter. Be the light I could never find my way back to. The watch was simple, a worn silver timepiece that had stopped working years ago, but still carried the weight of family history. Amanda held it carefully, knowing she would keep it safe for Emma until her daughter was old enough to understand its significance. As Amanda prepared to leave the hospital and begin her new life as a single mother, she felt a sense of closure settling over the trauma of the past months. Marcus's story had reached its end, but Emma's story was just beginning, and it would be written by a mother who had learned that love could survive even the deepest betrayal, and that sometimes the greatest strength came from choosing hope in the face of unimaginable loss. 1 year later, Amanda stood in the nursery of her small apartment across town, watching 18-month-old Emma play with wooden blocks on the carpet. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows caught the gold in Emma's dark curls, hair that had lightened from Marcus's deep brown to something uniquely her own. "Mama," Emma said, holding up a block shaped like a star. At 18 months, she was already showing signs of the intelligence Amanda had hoped she would inherit from both parents, the curiosity without the capacity for deception. Amanda had made the difficult decision not to enter witness protection. Marcus's testimony had been so thorough that the criminal organization he had belonged to was effectively dismantled. The remaining members who weren't in federal prison had fled to other countries, and Detective Sullivan assured her that the threat level had diminished significantly. Instead, Amanda had rebuilt her life in the same city where everything had fallen apart. She returned to teaching at Roosevelt Elementary, where her colleagues and students' families had rallied around her with support that still brought tears to her eyes. The principal had held her position for the entire school year, and parents had organized meal trains and babysitting schedules to help her transition back to work. Mrs. Santos, her student Kevin, had said on her first day back, "My mom says you're really brave. Did you fight dragons?" Amanda had laughed, the first genuine laugh she could remember in months. "Something like that, Kevin, but the most important thing I did was protect my baby, like a mama bear," Kevin had observed with 6-year-old wisdom. Exactly like a mama bear. Detective Sullivan visited every few weeks, officially to check on their security, but really to see Emma grow and develop. He had become the grandfather figure Amanda had hoped Emma would have, reading stories, teaching her to stack blocks, and talking to her in the patient voice of a man who understood that children needed consistency and gentle strength. "She's going to be tall," he observed during one visit, watching Emma toddle around the apartment with determined independence. "And she has your stubborn streak. Is that good or bad?" Amanda asked, grateful for the easy relationship that had developed between them. With everything she might face growing up, stubborn is good. Stubborn keeps you fighting when things get difficult. Dr. Hayes had become not just Emma's pediatrician, but a close family friend. Her medical practice included several other children whose mothers had survived domestic trauma, and she had connected Amanda with a support network of women who understood the unique challenges of raising children born from complicated circumstances. "Emma is thriving," Dr. Hayes said during their most recent appointment. "Physically, emotionally, developmentally, she's meeting every milestone beautifully. Whatever trauma you experienced during pregnancy, it hasn't affected her adversely." The support group Amanda had joined during her pregnancy had evolved into lasting friendships. The women met monthly now, sharing the ordinary challenges of parenthood alongside the extraordinary challenges of healing from betrayal. Amanda had become something of a mentor to newer members, offering the perspective of someone who had not only survived, but found a way to build joy on the other side of devastation. "The hardest part," Amanda had told a newly arrived member, "isn't learning to trust other people again. It's learning to trust yourself, but you will. Your instincts are stronger than you think." Beth had moved to an apartment 2 blocks away, becoming the devoted aunt who spoiled Emma with books and art supplies and took her to the park every Saturday morning. The sisters had grown closer through the crisis, their relationship deepened by shared adversity and mutual support. "Have you thought about what you'll tell Emma about Marcus when she's older?" Beth asked one evening as they watched Emma sleep in her crib. Amanda had been considering this question for months. "I'll tell her the truth, but in age-appropriate pieces. When she's very young, I'll just say her daddy loved her very much but couldn't be with us. When she's older, I'll explain about his childhood trauma and the bad choices he made. When she's an adult, I'll give her his letters and let her decide if she wants any contact with him. Do you think she'll want to meet him someday?" "I think she'll be curious, and when that time comes, I'll support whatever decision she makes." The letters from Marcus arrived monthly, always screened by authorities before being forwarded to Amanda. She read them all, but saved them in a special box for Emma to discover when she was ready. Marcus wrote about his therapy sessions, his college courses, his work with other inmates who were trying to break cycles of violence. He was clearly trying to become the man he wished he had been from the beginning. In his most recent letter, Marcus had written, "Amanda, I know I have no right to ask this, but when Emma is old enough to understand forgiveness, will you tell her that her father spent every day of his sentence trying to become worthy of the love she carries? I will never stop being grateful that she has you as her mother." Amanda had cried reading that letter, not from sadness, but from a complex emotion she was still learning to name, a mixture of grief for what had been lost and hope for what had been gained. On Emma's first birthday, Amanda had taken her daughter to visit Marcus in federal prison. It was a difficult decision, but Amanda felt that Emma should have the opportunity to meet her father, even briefly, while she was too young to understand the circumstances. Marcus had cried when he saw Emma, his hands shaking as he held his daughter. For the first time through the glass partition of the prison visiting room. "She's perfect," he had whispered. "She's everything good that either of us could ever create." Emma had studied her father with the serious attention she gave to all new people, eventually reaching toward the glass as if trying to touch his face. "She knows you love her," Amanda had told Marcus. Somehow she knows. Now, as Amanda tucked Emma into her crib for the night, she reflected on how much their lives had changed. The small apartment was filled with Emma's toys and books, Amanda's teaching materials, and photographs of their growing extended family of choice: Detective Sullivan, Dr. Hayes, Beth, and the friends who had become Emma's chosen aunts and uncles. "Good night, sweet girl," Amanda whispered, kissing Emma's forehead. "Tomorrow we'll read stories and play in the park, and maybe visit Detective Sullivan so you can show him how you can walk without holding on to anything." Emma smiled in her sleep, secure in the knowledge that she was deeply loved and carefully protected. As Amanda prepared for bed in her own room, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was stronger than the one who had hidden under a bed in terror 15 months ago. She had learned that love could survive betrayal, that trust could be rebuilt carefully and selectively, and that sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was choose hope in the face of unimaginable loss. Emma Grace Santos would grow up knowing that her mother had faced darkness and chosen light, that her father had loved her enough to spend his life trying to become worthy of that love, and that a child could thrive even in the aftermath of tragedy. Outside their apartment window, the city lights twinkled like stars, illuminating a world where anything was possible for a little girl whose story was just beginning, a story that would be written by the choices of love, courage, and hope, rather than the shadows of the past.